London Accessibility Meetup number 6, 11th of September 2017, with Catharine Green and Sareh Heidari. Session 2, Accessibility and the BBC News front page.
Hi, it's a pleasure to be here. I'm Sarah and this is Catharine. As you know, we work as developers at BBC News. This talk will be a tale of two parts. First part is how to get all your team engaged with accessibility and to be enthusiastic about it. And secondly, we'll cover our accessibility user research that was conducted on the front page of BBC News. So, over to Catharine for the first part.
So part one, how to engage your team with an accessible culture. We've just completed a 16-month project to build a new front page for the BBC News website. Both Sareh and I were a part of this team. Quite often a team will have one accessibility champion. An accessibility champion is someone who champions accessibility. You don't have to be an expert, however you do have to be passionate about accessibility and be willing to shout out for this cause. We have over 130 accessibility champions at the BBC. So from the outset, the front page team had more than one accessibility champion, both Sareh and I. So as the project progressed, we achieved engagement with accessibility from everyone in the team. So how did we achieve this? Step one, engage all disciplines. Everyone has a part to play. So accessibility is a cross-discipline solution, not just the role of a developer. To meet accessibility standards, you need to have engagement from everyone in the team. Everyone has a part to play. So for accessibility to be a success on our project, we needed to engage all disciplines. So your setup might be slightly different. In our team, this meant product owner, business analyst, designer, developer, and tester. So to achieve engagement, we wrote accessibility checklists for each discipline, from product owner to tester. So accessibility could be considered at every stage, and so everyone knew what part they had to play. I'll now talk a little in turn about each discipline. First, product owner. As a result of the product owner being engaged with accessibility, they commissioned accessibility user research on the new front page, both lab-based and home visit. This was the first time this type of research had been carried out on the BBC News responsive web product. More about this later. So, business analyst. The business analyst wrote accessibility acceptance criteria for all parts of the project. This was also the first time this had been done. The accessibility acceptance criteria was written based on using voiceover, such as, given I'm using a screen reader and I'm navigating by heading, when I navigate to the H2 component, then the screen reader reads out around the UK heading level 2, and then the screen reader reads out around the UK region landmark. So designer. Design were also more engaged with accessibility, with designers thinking more about the whole experience, including those with impairments, considering factors such as colour contrast, colour blindness, touch area size, the impact Flex CSS might have on content order and tab order for screen reader users. Peer accessibility reviews took place on designs with accessibility champions, along with discussions with the development team on things such as markup. Developer. The development team had a new, more in-depth checklist to work to. They used BBC Alley, a new tool from the BBC Accessibility team, which checks code against the BBC accessibility standards and guidelines. They integrated accessibility linters, such as JSX Alley, and tested with assistive technology throughout development. This resulted in a high standard of accessibility on the new code written for the front page, and increased accessibility to shared code that was used on the front page. Enthusiasm spread to other development teams in other departments who also used the shared code, which led them to make improvements to their own code. And finally, tester. The tester also had a new checklist to work to. They tested with assistive technology and used the accessibility acceptance criteria written by the business analyst to test against. So step 2, define assistive technology priorities. So everyone knows what assistive technology to test with, and so everyone knows what the priorities are. Assistive technology, often shortened to AT, can make devices easier to use and content more accessible for someone with an impairment. This can include objects, such as input devices, or systems, such as computer software, which increases or maintains the capabilities of someone with an impairment. Input devices can range from switch devices to braille displays, and computer software can range from screen magnifier, speech recognition, reading solution to screen reader, and more. So we wrote our assistive technology testing priorities based on the gov.uk assistive technology survey in 2016 and our own audience. This meant we were now testing with assistive technology other than screen readers, which had been our main focus before. We now test from desktop to mobile and from screen magnifier, speech recognition, reading solution to screen reader. So step 3, accessibility laptops, easy access for all to assistive technology. For testing with assistive technology to be a success, you need to make sure there are no barriers to accessing this. We all use Macs, so we got PC laptops specifically for testing with assistive technology which was PC-based, such as ZoomText, Dragon, JAWS, NVDA. The laptops were shared between all team members and could be accessed by anyone at any time. This meant no more slow virtual machines and no Mac keyboard when you needed a PC shortcut. So step 4, testing steps. How do I use the assistive technology? Next, you need to make sure everyone knows how to use all the assistive technology. So we wrote simple testing steps for all the assistive technology defined in our priorities. From screen magnifier, speech recognition, reading solution, to screen reader. So anyone in any role should be able to use any of the assistive technologies comfortably. You should be able to come to the testing steps, having never used the assistive technology before, and be able to easily test a component. So step 5, accessibility swarms. Everyone knows the experience. So the 5th step to engagement, accessibility swarms. Before a ticket moves from development to test, as a team, everyone downs tools and gets together to run through the final accessibility checks and test with all supported assistive technology. All disciplines can join in. Ideally, you want a mix of roles, such as business analyst, designer, and developer. Everyone considers the whole experience. You can talk through any issues together as a team. It's now a team responsibility. The onus is not just on one person. And it's more fun doing it as a team than on your own. Ed, our trainee, said, doing accessibility testing like this in a group makes the process more enjoyable and has helped me get familiar with using different assisted tech. So 5 top tips to engage your team with an accessible culture. 1, accessibility is for everyone. Engage all disciplines. 2, define clear assistive technology priorities. 3, have no barriers to accessing assistive technology. 4, simple testing steps so everyone knows how to use the assistive technology. And step 5, accessibility swarming through the final checks. Here's over to Sareh for part 2.
Okay, so now that Catharine has given you a bit of an insight into how we test and deal with things internally throughout the course of the project, I'm going to focus on recent accessibility user research that we carried out on the news front page. So the reason why we decided to carry out this research was that we wanted to focus on a page because the front page, because it had a new layout, it had a new structure. And so we wanted to ensure that the experience for this page was as good as we can possibly make it for users, including those using assistive technologies. Before we started rolling that, what we were doing out to more pages. So before we were moving from the news front page onto other pages and other sites even across the BBC. So to do this, an external agency was commissioned to undertake this research project. And this user research was lab-based, which involved getting a set number of participants, which are members of the public, to give feedback on the site. So, what were the main aims for the research? What would we want to gain out of conducting this? Initially, we wanted to find out what's working, what isn't working, really. What can we improve? What do we think we're doing well, but not quite reaching? Was the front page a good user experience for users of assistive technology? That's our main aim, firstly. And secondly, really we wanted to use this as an excuse, as a way to increase awareness and engagement with accessibility within the department as a whole. So from key stakeholders, senior stakeholders, to enable them to firsthand see the impact that the decisions that they make, to see what impact that has on users. All the way to junior team members getting their first exposure to what assistive technology really is and how this can be used by a wide range of users that have impairments. So, as you can imagine, like setting up some user research might take a bit of time. And initially, and also to decide on how to do that, we need to focus on planning. So this included several parts, which I'll go through in detail. For example, what participants did we want to recruit? What assistive technologies did we want to test with? Because we didn't have time to go through every single possible technology that exists. So what do we want to prioritize to use? Thirdly, what content were we exactly going to focus on? And fourthly, what session structure should we have? So even thinking more detailed into the time we have with the participant, how do you want to break out that time to ensure that it's focused and we can gain the most from the user and gain the most useful feedback from them? And finally, who we're going to invite to observe the session, because it's not just it's not so useful if you just have like one person who's a user researcher observing. We wanted to get, as they said, one of our main aims is to get awareness throughout the whole of the department. So observers are key as well. So here's like a screenshot of the news front page at desktop. So this is one of the main parts that we were testing. So what participant profiles did we care about? So what kind of participants did we want? So according to the budget and time and focus of the project, we decided to recruit 12 participants. Then the research was to be lab-based or a home visit, depending on the need of the particular participant. We decided to extend it. So usually sessions were 60 minutes, but to have 90 minutes per person as well. So that was to enable people to get set up with their assistive tech, because some of them will bring their own devices, so that had the software that they needed. So to get that set up so it's all visible, so we could get cameras filming interactions, all of that, so it's a general setup. And also to allow us to look at both desktop and mobile for those people that use both. So some people had their mobile device and some people had like a laptop device that they use at home or a tablet device, things like that. So we wanted to capture feedback from a range of devices that people were actually using. Right. So in addition to that, we wanted to ensure that a range of the participants, they we had a range of different impairments. So this was to get as much feedback from people with many different perspectives as possible. So for example, so the 12 are for with cognitive disabilities, so dyslexia and autism, 6 with with vision, low vision or blindness, 1 being hard of hearing, so with British Sign Language as their first language, and 1 with motor skill issues, who was a switch user, and so that was the person that was the home visit was conducted with. So they would be able to use the technology that they were using. So a range of different people. So, okay, so those are the participants. So how did we map those to actually things, how to recruit them to what kind of assistive technologies would we prioritize for this testing? So on the screen is a screenshot of our accessibility, some of the checklist and user information that Catharine was referring to earlier. So on it includes things like Zoom text, magnifier reader, Dragon Naturally Speaking, JAWS, read and write, VoiceOver for iOS, etc. So, and the different versions that are most commonly used by users according to the GovUK survey that we were referring to. So, so as we talked about the different impairments and now mapping to assistive technologies, we also ensured that we were focused on perhaps the different software, browsers, and platforms. For example, Dragon Naturally Speaking version 13 with IE11. So it's pretty detailed, you might think. But that's what we started off with. Okay, so that's the assistive technology. What else did we need to plan everything? So test pages. So content of what we were actually going to put in front of users during the session. So of course, by that stage, we'd already the page was already live. So we had the live page, so with live news, which is useful. So we weren't just all relying on live, or relying on mock-ups or anything. So that live page was what we actually started off with in a session. However, we have different modes for the front page. So when there's like a breaking news alert, there's different layouts that we have, and there's more content that's shown and different structures and things, and there might be a live story which is updating content, and we can't exactly predict when. We can't schedule news to happen conveniently during our usability session, the user research session. So we had to create test pages so that we can show the different modes of our site to our users in the testing. So that's why we have test pages in addition to our live site. Okay, so next in our planning and setup, the session structure. So what will we focus on during that 90 minutes that we have with the user? So there's different aspects, all important in their own ways. So it might sound obvious, but starting off with an introduction, asking a chance to gain a little bit of background, a chance to gain a bit of background information from the person, the participant, and get them set up with their assistive tech in the room. After that, we go to like free exploration of the page. So that means load the page, the free news front page on their device, to see their initial reactions, just general comments, using their primary device. And then also doing that on their secondary device. So if their primary device was a phone, we'd go through that, and then their secondary device was a laptop, we'd go through that as well. So that was the free exploration, and that gave us a bit of insight to initial impressions and things like that. Then after that was task-led exploration. So participants were provided with tasks on various parts of the page. So we had new features that we wanted to test to make sure how they behaved and how people interacted with them. For example, selecting your location to get local news. So that's a part that appears on the front page. We also wanted to get feedback on the elements such as navigation, landmarks, heading structure, layout, and ease of finding like specific content. How easy was it for a user to get to content that they wanted to access and they knew was on the page. So, and then after that task-led exploration, that's finally the user researcher who was in the room with the participant came around and asked the observers whether they had any questions. So that was very interesting. So during the course of the majority of that session, then an observer, so anybody in the team really, can also contribute to questions, maybe clarifying questions or any follow-up questions that they felt were useful. So that's what the general session structure was. Yes, and I alluded to this a bit. There are observers. On the screen there's a photo of the observation room, and there's a one-way mirror. So in the other room is a room where there is a desk and a few cameras, so that a mobile device or can be held under a camera, so we can get the screen as a user goes through it. And also there's like connections for laptops, so they can be live streamed into the room here. So we wanted to get as many observers as possible. The room isn't that big, it only holds about 8 people. So, so in an organisation also as large as the BBC, people have their calendars booked up pretty quickly. So it's really important to actually get people with enough notice. So to send around communications about the fact that we have this user research that's happening. So in our case, it was like with email and Slack. To communicate around, and to encourage people from the most senior, I guess, also to the most junior to sign up and get a slot to attend. And that was pretty valuable, and we'll go through what people's feedback was in a little bit. So now to the results of the sessions. The agency provided us with a detailed report, which is a bit too detailed to go into right now, but we can definitely talk about it later. For me, I found the types of feedback really interesting because I hadn't really observed this kind of user testing before. I never really, user testing, accessibility user research in this particular way. So the types of feedback were covering what we were doing well, what was causing difficulty for some, and also suggested improvements. So some of those suggested improvements were the actual users suggesting it. Some of them were the actual user researchers that condensed them, that analysed all of the feedback from the different participants and suggested a way to overcome the difficulties of the users. And in this report that the agency provided us, we were able to then take those improvements and use them in future planning sessions and how we would like to improve the site. So, high-level findings include things like there's just generally an overall positive experience, which is quite nice to see, because you're never quite sure what users might say to you when they're absolutely able to say anything that they would like about your product. And they felt that there's some room for improvement. It was quite more accessible than other websites that they used in terms of like structure and things. And users love the clear linear layout on mobile. So on mobile, we've got 2 screenshots of parts of the front page of news. And on the mobile screen, they can only show a certain amount of content, and there's one clear stream of content. So there is not multiple ways of navigating in terms of the order. For the sighted participants, they felt that it was not very overwhelming, whereas desktop could be. And they liked that everything on mobile uses the same text size for the most part, and image size, or at least consistently. So that makes it easy to take in content. So that was some of the feedback that we got. And I'd like to say that not everything was all seamless. As though there was lots and lots of planning and preparations, you really can't predict everything. So whatever can go wrong will go wrong, but hopefully I'm just going to glance over what some of the things that happened. So although we set out to get 12 participants, actually 9 out of the 12 weren't exactly what we recruited for. So for example, in one session, almost the entire session had gone by, and the participant didn't actually demonstrate any need for the in particular assistive tech. So the user researcher tried to focus on and tease out what was happening. And it became apparent that although they thought that Zoom text, which is, some of you might know, is a particular software, the participant actually thought that meant zooming in on the text. So, and they said, yeah, sure, I zoom in on the text all the time. So there was really a bit of a misunderstanding through the recruitment process, really. So that happened. And so that highlighted to us a lot about how much clarity is really needed, and how sometimes, even though you might plan for every eventuality, you really can't predict everything up front. Yes, and moderation. So moderation, by this I mean the person in the room with the participant talking them through the session. What we didn't know until the sessions were about to start was that there were several people that the agency had hired, and the accessibility expert was going to be conducting half of the sessions, and the user researcher, the main user researcher, the other half. And though the accessibility expert had a really great insight into all of the different use cases of assistive tech and how to get things set up and the real details of all of that, they didn't have the user research expertise. And so that wasn't particularly great from a research perspective. So this was a thing that we would like to focus on a little bit in future when running future sessions. So factors in terms of what might have caused these things to happen. In organising all of this user research, things took a long time to get. It took a long time to get all of this set up. Mainly difficulties over budget approval and things like that, which can happen in a large organisation. We had 3 separate internal user researchers leading on the project over several months, and they changed, and the lead researcher in the agency changed during that time. So there's lots of going over things and going over planning and things like that. Participant profiles that we had up front were too specific. So as I said, we had things like particular versions of software. So after that, they have difficulty recruiting people. So there was pressure from the agency, therefore, it became necessary to relax the constraints for finding participants. For example, one of the recruiting the recruitment requirements was to use Dragon Naturally Speaking. So that's the software to use voice input and also get output via audio. But actually, the candidate, the participant in the testing, only used Dragon Dictate, which was a dictation software so it was kind of a little bit of a confusion in that sense. So that was one of the downsides that we had there. But although overall, in terms of feedback, there were many aspects of the research that went very well. We fed back to them the things that we felt didn't go so well, and they were really great at taking that on board and accommodating and super understanding about it. And as a result, we actually reran about 7 sessions with new participants within the same month. And the results fed into the main report that they gave us, which was really great to have that. And now we're close to the end of the talk. So Catharine and I would like to talk to you about the observers that observed the session and what they said about all of this.
So over 40 people came to the lab to observe, from most teams in the department and from most disciplines. So from editor, product owner, business analyst, user researcher, designer, developer, to tester. And in addition, for those who couldn't observe in person, they watched the live stream in the office in London, Cardiff, and Salford. So after the research sessions were conducted, we sent out an online survey in which we asked observers a few short questions. Were we right? Had levels of awareness increased in the department? Here are a few of the questions and answers from the survey.
So, prior to observing at the lab or the live stream, had you witnessed anyone with an impairment use assistive technology before? And the answer was 55% no and 45% yes. Noor, one of our UX designers, said, I now understand the pain users of accessible technology can go through to access content much more.
So question 2. As a result of observing the research, do you feel more informed about assistive technology and how someone with an impairment might use this? So 10% said no, and a whopping 90% said yes. So Stephen, one of our developers, he said he learned a lot, that not every screen reader user is an expert at using the assistive technology, and that not every user will navigate using headers. Some may prefer using links or some other type of element. And Shilpa, one of the testers, observed that assistive technology has an affordability and lack of awareness and training that can affect the way users engage with it.
So, question 3. As a result of observing the user research, do you feel your level of awareness, engagement with accessibility has improved? So 95% of people said yes. Takako, a developer, said that it was quite an eye-opening experience, and I certainly would do my best to apply this knowledge I gained in my everyday practice. Alison, an assistant editor, so on the content creation side of things, said, I thought it was really interesting to see people with accessibility issues use our website in real time and discover the particular problems they face. So all in all, kind of summing up all of the different aspects of that we had in terms of running your own accessibility user research that we'd come across. Going over things, so A, plan which AT you will use, test pages, use short URL links as bit.ly links, save time, like that. Session structure, plan your session structure, inform everybody, all of the observers to attend, and make sure there's consistency across different sessions. Secondly, ensure you have an accessibility expert leading recruitment, whether that's a user researcher with in-depth accessibility knowledge or accessibility specialist, as they will have knowledge of the AT specifically. Thirdly, try to be flexible. For example, just because we tested internally with the latest version of JAWS, doesn't mean that you can only have to conduct research on that particular version. You can open it up a bit and give the agency a wider range for them to find participants with. Then after that, make sure you invite all disciplines to be involved. So that includes sending invites well in advance. If you're able to get the research live streamed, for those who can't attend in person, that's great. That can also create a buzz in the office, which it did for us. And enables people in different departments and different locations that can't get to the research centre to participate. And finally, and I think also most importantly, to get feedback from the agency, feedback from observers to see what everybody gained from the sessions, and how everybody can be supported in thinking about accessibility and accessible websites throughout their future work as well. So, thank you for listening.
Hey, I was really interested in the point where you effectively had to redo sessions because the people recruited were not using the accessive technologies the way you wanted them. Effectively, they were using dictate rather than naturally speaking. Do you know how much money that cost you?
The agency redid it for free.
Okay, do you know how much it cost them?
We'll speak about that afterwards if you want.
Yeah, it's a lot. It's awful. So I did this sort of thing. I was head of usability and accessibility at the BBC 10 years ago. And we had exactly the same problems then. It's really difficult. There are better ways of doing recruitment with disabled people these days. So I don't want to advertise at you now. But certainly it's one of the things we found is that you've just got to get that right, or it's just loads of money down the drain.
On the responses you got from your co-workers, the very small proportions where it was like 5% no, did you ever go back to them and say, hey, how come?
Well, some of those people actually were in some of the sessions where the recruitment didn't go so well. So actually some people actually never observed anyone using assistive technology, unfortunately. So quite often that was why the number was down.